The slap landed before Elise could finish her sentence. She stood frozen at the center of the marble foyer, one hand on her burning cheek, the other still holding her employment file. The woman who struck her, Vivian Cole, didn't blink. She looked down from the stairs, expression sharp and composed. "I didn't give you permission to speak," Vivian said. "And I certainly didn't invite you inside." "I was told to wait in the entryway," Elise said, voice steady. Vivian descended the stairs slowly. Her heels echoed with each step. The red silk dress she wore clung to her like armor. She stopped 2 feet from Elise and stared her down. "You're the new help," she said coldly. "What's your name?" "Elise Mensa," Elise replied. Vivian scanned her from head to toe. "You don't look like much." Then again, none of them did. She reached to the side, picked up a glass of orange juice from the console table, and without warning, tipped it over. The juice splashed across the clean floor and onto the edge of Elise's shoes. "You can start by cleaning that," Vivian said. "Then mop the staircase. If I find a single streak, you'll be out by sundown." She turned around and walked off without another word. Elise stood still for a moment, then bent down and began to clean. The butler nearby said nothing. The cook who had watched the scene unfold quickly returned to the kitchen. No one offered her a cloth. No one offered help. She found a towel and wiped the juice from the floor. Her face still stung, but she didn't touch it. She had dealt with worse before. A week ago, she was sitting outside the emergency room with her son Jalen's chart on her lap, waiting for a doctor who didn't show because she hadn't paid the full deposit. She wrung out the towel, picked up a mop, and turned to the staircase. There were 42 steps. Each one shown already, but Elise knew better than to assume that meant anything. She mopped carefully, working her way up, checking for watermarks as she went. By the time she reached the top, her arms ached, and the cloth had picked up nearly nothing. Still, she finished the job. At 5:30, Vivian came down again. She walked slowly, tracing the railing with her fingertips. When she reached the bottom, she glanced down at the marble. She didn't say anything. Elise stepped back to let her pass. Vivian gave her one more look, then continued walking. No compliments. No scolding. The housekeeper gestured to Elise to follow and led her to the back. Her room was a repurposed supply closet. A thin mattress lay on the floor beside a stack of buckets and an old mop. There was no fan, and the single window didn't open properly. Elise set her nylon bag in the corner and sat on the edge of the mattress. She looked around the small space, then closed her eyes for a moment to rest. Elise woke before dawn. Her back ached from the thin mattress, but she didn't waste time stretching or complaining. She folded her wrapper, tied her scarf, and stepped out quietly. The hallway was dark, the mansion still asleep. She grabbed a broom and began sweeping the back porch before the sun rose. By 5:30, she had already wiped the glass doors, cleaned the pantry shelves, and rinsed out the mop from the night before. No one told her to do any of it. She just moved from one task to the next, silently. In the kitchen, the cook, Mrs. Opal, paused when she saw her scrubbing the counter. "You're early," she said. Elise rinsed the cloth and kept wiping, just trying to stay ahead. "You're working too fast," Opal warned. "She'll find fault no matter what. Don't burn yourself out." "I'm used to it." Mrs. Opal lowered her voice. "You don't talk much, do you?" "I don't need to," Elise replied. At 6:15, Vivian entered the kitchen. Her silk robe was tied tight at the waist, and her hair was already styled. She held her phone in one hand and walked with her usual sharp steps. Elise stood to the side and bowed slightly. "Where is my lemon water?" Vivian asked without looking up. "I'll get it now," Elise said. "Room temperature. Not warm. Not cold. Not with old lemons. Not from the fridge. If I take one sip and it's wrong, you'll pack your things." "Yes, ma'am." Elise picked up a clean glass, poured water from the dispenser, and sliced 2 thin lemon rounds. She stirred slowly, checked the temperature with her fingers, and placed the glass on a tray. Then she carried it up the stairs without a sound. She knocked softly. "Come in," Vivian said. The bedroom looked untouched. Pillows arranged perfectly, curtains drawn halfway. The white dog on the bed barked once before returning to its spot. Elise set the tray down on the side table. Vivian picked up the glass, took a slow sip and narrowed her eyes. She said nothing for a few seconds. "You got lucky." Elise said nothing. Vivian placed the glass down. "There's a stain on the bathroom sink. Clean it." Elise entered the bathroom. A faint orange ring had formed around the drain. She picked up a sponge and scrubbed. As she reached for the faucet, her shoulder bumped into a small perfume bottle. It wobbled. She caught it just in time and placed it back. When she turned around, Vivian was in the doorway, arms crossed. "You almost broke that," she said. "I didn't." Vivian stepped forward and slapped her again, this time across the other cheek. "I don't like excuses." Elise blinked hard but didn't move. "Sorry, ma'am." Vivian stared at her. "You're not crying?" "No, ma'am." "You think you're strong?" "I'm just working." Vivian scoffed and turned around. "You'll be gone by the end of the week." Later that morning, Elise was assigned to clean the guest room. The sheets were still on the bed. Vivian's instructions were clear: iron the bedding while it was on the mattress. No wrinkles allowed. Elise set the iron to low, placed a towel underneath, and moved carefully from corner to corner. It took 45 minutes, but she finished without burning the fabric. She stepped back just as the butler passed by. "She made the last girl redo that bed 3 times, he muttered. "Good luck." "I'm finished," Elise said simply. He looked at her for a second. "You're not what she expects." Elise returned to the hallway. Mr. Adrian Cole stood at the end, watching silently. His expression was unreadable. He didn't speak, just nodded once and walked away. At noon, Elise took a short break behind the laundry room. She sat on an overturned crate and opened a small tin of rice she had packed from the night before. It was cold, but she ate slowly, staring at the floor. She didn't check her phone. She didn't scroll through anything. She just ate in silence. Mrs. Opal appeared a few minutes later. "She's looking for you." Elise stood up immediately and returned to the main hall. Vivian was in the living room, flipping through a magazine. She didn't look up. "The stain on the upstairs mirror is still there. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I'll clean it again." "Do it now. And take your bag out of the hallway. This isn't a bus station." "Yes, ma'am." Elise went upstairs, polished the mirror, and returned the cleaning supplies. She found her bag still sitting near the laundry room and moved it into the closet space beside the supply rack. By evening, the staff were whispering again. "She hasn't cried once. She hasn't even flinched. She's still here." In the kitchen, the steward asked Mrs. Opal, "How long do you think she'll last?" Opal shrugged. "She doesn't talk back. But she's not scared either." Vivian walked in as they spoke. The conversation died instantly. "Where's the new girl?" she asked. "Upstairs," Opal replied. Vivian didn't say anything else. She took her wine glass and left the kitchen. That night, Elise returned to her corner room, closed the door quietly, and sat down. Her legs ached. Her hands were sore. Her face still held the faint sting of Vivian's slap. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She opened a small notebook and looked at the note from the doctor. Surgery quote, medication list, test results. Her eyes scanned the numbers. The costs hadn't changed. She folded the paper carefully, slipped it back inside the notebook and lay down. She didn't need kindness. She needed the paycheck. And no matter what Vivian Cole threw at her, she wasn't leaving. By the 4th day, Vivian Cole had run out of ways to provoke a reaction. Elise followed every order without hesitation. She spoke only when addressed, never raised her voice, and never asked for anything. She cleaned before she was told, stood when others sat, and stayed out of sight unless summoned. She never smiled, never complained, never looked tired, even when she clearly was. Vivian didn't like it. At breakfast, she knocked a fork to the floor on purpose. Elise picked it up before anyone else moved. Vivian said, "Use a glove next time. I don't want your fingerprints on my silver." Elise responded with a quiet, "Yes, ma'am," and continued clearing the plates. Later, she was ordered to remop the upstairs hallway, even though she'd just finished it 10 minutes before. Vivian watched her do it. "You missed a spot," she said flatly. Elise didn't argue. She turned around and passed the mop over the area again. By mid-afternoon, Vivian was irritated enough to summon the housekeeper. "She hasn't broken yet?" she asked. "She's efficient," the housekeeper replied. "That's not what I asked." The housekeeper didn't respond. Vivian turned to her butler. "You tell her to clean the wine cellar. Use the old mop." The butler nodded and went downstairs. He found Elise folding towels outside the laundry room. "Madam wants you to mop the cellar. The tiles down there stain. Use the mop in the back, not the new one." Elise stood up, took the old mop, and made her way to the cellar. The air was damp. The room smelled of wood and earth. She didn't rush. She worked slowly, knowing the stains would take time. The floor was rough, uneven. Her hands blistered from the pressure on the stick. After 40 minutes, she returned the mop, washed her hands, and resumed cleaning the kitchen counters without a word. Mrs. Opal looked at her. "She sent you to the cellar?" "Yes." "With that old mop?" Elise nodded. "She's pushing you." "I know." "You're not going to say anything?" "No." Vivian entered the kitchen just as Mrs. Opal fell silent. "Is my tea ready?" Mrs. Opal stepped forward. "Just finishing, ma'am." "I wasn't asking you. I want Elise to serve me." Elise dried her hands and took the cup from the tray. "Room temperature. And bring 1 sugar cube. Not 2. Not half." Elise prepared the tea exactly as told. She placed the cup on a saucer, added 1 cube of sugar, and carried it upstairs. Vivian was in the lounge, scrolling through her tablet. She didn't look up as Elise approached. "Set it down. On the right side table." Elise placed the tea where instructed and waited. Vivian picked up the cup, took a sip, then set it down slowly. "Too bland." "I followed the instructions, ma'am." "Then next time, use your judgment." "Yes, ma'am." Vivian stared at her. "You always do what you're told?" "I do what's necessary." Vivian crossed her arms. "You think that makes you special?" "No, ma'am." "Then what does?" "I'm not here to be special. I'm here to work." Vivian stood up. "And if I told you to leave right now?" "I would leave." Vivian studied her. "But you won't beg?" "No." "Why?" "I don't beg people who don't need me. I beg for my son. That's all." Vivian's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened slightly on the tablet. "You have a son?" "Yes, ma'am." "Where is he?" "With a neighbor." "He's sick." "What kind of sick?" "He can't walk. His bones didn't form right. The doctors want to operate." Vivian sat down slowly. "Is that why you're here?" "Yes." "How much is the surgery?" $320,000. "Do you think you'll make that here?" "I don't know. But it's the only job paying enough to try." Vivian picked up her tea again. "You're still not crying." "Not even now." "I've already cried," Elise said. "It didn't help." There was a long silence. Vivian took another sip, then said, "You can go." Elise nodded and left the room without another word. Downstairs, the other staff glanced at her as she walked past. None of them spoke, but a few watched her longer than usual. She returned to the laundry room, rinsed out the cloth she'd left soaking, and continued cleaning as if nothing had happened. That evening, Mr. Adrian Cole passed her in the hallway. He paused for a moment and said quietly, "You've lasted longer than most." Elise stopped and faced him. "I don't plan to leave, sir." He nodded. "Good night." "Good night, sir." She returned to her room and sat on the edge of her mattress. Her hands were sore. Her arms ached. Her cheeks still held a faint shadow from the last slap. She opened her notebook, glanced at the hospital invoice again, and closed it. She didn't need Vivian to like her. She didn't need kindness. She needed that salary. And if Vivian's slaps couldn't move her, nothing else would. By the end of the first week, Elise had become the quiet center of every whisper in the house. No one had expected her to last past the 3rd day. Yet every morning she appeared before sunrise, swept the compound, cleaned the stairs, and prepared breakfast trays as if her body never ached and her face had never been slapped. Vivian noticed. And she didn't like what she saw. On Saturday morning, Elise returned to her small closet room after finishing the upstairs corridor. Her uniform, neatly folded, was missing from the shelf. In its place was a thin, see-through lace nightgown she had never seen before. She stood still for a moment, then walked to the door. Mrs. Opal spotted her in the hallway. "What's wrong?" "My uniform is gone," Elise said. "Gone? I found this instead." Elise held up the lace nightgown. Opal frowned. "You're not seriously wearing that, are you?" "No," Elise said. "But I still have my wrapper." That afternoon, Elise walked through the hallway in a plain t-shirt and her own wrapper tied around her waist. The material was clean but faded from too many washes. The housekeeper raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Vivian came down the stairs just as Elise was wiping the baseboards. She stopped and looked Elise up and down. "Did you sleep in the gutter?" she said, loud enough for the nearby steward to hear. "Or are you just dressing to match the mop?" Elise didn't answer. She stood, nodded, and returned to cleaning the other side of the hallway. The steward turned away to hide a smile. The housekeeper avoided eye contact. Vivian said nothing else. She walked away, the hem of her dress brushing the polished floor. Later that evening, Elise was ordered to clean the white sitting room rug. It was already spotless, but she took her time with it, brushing each section by hand. At exactly 6:45 p.m., Vivian entered with a glass of red wine. She walked across the room, paused near the center of the rug, then tilted the glass and let the wine pour out slowly. The deep red liquid spread over the fabric like ink. "Oh," she said without emotion. "Clumsy me." The other staff didn't dare speak. Elise set down her brush, went to get towels, and began blotting the spill. She didn't question it. She didn't look up. She cleaned the stain like it was an accident. Vivian crossed her arms and stood over her. "This is why I don't trust help from agencies. They don't train you properly. Maybe you prefer to clean gutters." Elise kept her focus on the rug. When she finished, she collected the towels and left the room without a word. In the kitchen, Mrs. Opal was stirring stew. "What happened?" "Wine spill." "Was it real?" "No." "Was she watching?" "Yes." "She's trying to get under your skin." "She won't." On Sunday morning, Elise was sent to dust the display shelves in the formal dining room. As she wiped down a crystal bowl, Vivian entered behind her and leaned against the doorway. "That piece is handmade from Venice," she said. "If you break it, I'll dock a month of your pay." "Yes, ma'am." Vivian walked closer. "In fact, didn't you already break something last week?" "No, ma'am." "Are you calling me a liar?" "No, ma'am. I saw you knock over a vase. It cracked near the base." "I didn't touch any vase." Vivian stared at her. "So it broke itself?" "I wouldn't know." Vivian said nothing for a moment. Then she stepped back and left the room. That evening, Mr. Adrian Cole found Elise arranging cutlery on the dining table. He paused beside her and spoke quietly. "She's harder on you than most. She has her reasons. None of the others stayed long enough to learn those reasons. I don't plan on leaving." He nodded slowly. "Is your son okay?" "He's holding on. Let me know if you need anything." "Thank you, sir." He left the room without another word. After dinner, Elise returned to her room to find her small pillowcase missing. Her clothes had been shuffled. Someone had gone through her things. Nothing was taken, but it was enough to make a point. She folded her wrapper again and sat on the edge of the mattress. The next morning, she found her mop handle cracked, left leaning against the back door. She fixed it with tape and continued cleaning. In the hallway, the butler approached. "You're not tired yet?" "No." "She's trying to push you." "I know. She won't stop until you leave or break." "I'm not leaving." That afternoon, as Elise was polishing the railing, Vivian walked past her and said casually, "You'll need to clean the chandelier in the West Hall tomorrow. Without help. Use the old ladder. And don't leave fingerprints." "Yes, ma'am." "You'll probably fall. That thing's not stable." "I'll be careful." Vivian stopped and turned. "Do you ever raise your voice?" "No, ma'am." "Do you even get angry?" "I don't have time to be angry." Vivian watched her for a few seconds, then walked away. Elise continued polishing the rail. Later that evening, as she swept near the garden, the security guard at the front gate approached quietly. "You're not like the others," he said. "I know. They tried to fight back. That's why they lost. I'm not here to fight." "Then what are you doing?" "I'm staying." He nodded once and returned to his post. Elise finished sweeping the path and went back inside to prepare the linen for the next morning. On Monday afternoon, Elise was wiping down the windows near the east hallway when she overheard voices coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Opal and the housekeeper were talking in low tones, just out of sight but not out of earshot. "I don't think she sleeps," the housekeeper said. "She's up before all of us and still moving after midnight. She doesn't talk unless you ask. Doesn't argue. Doesn't ask for help. It's like she's made of stone," Opal replied. "Stone doesn't cry. But I saw her holding a photo in her room 2 nights ago." "A child?" "I think so." Elise paused for only a second, then returned to her cleaning. Later that evening, it started to rain lightly. The usual sounds in the house quieted. Mr. Adrian was reading in his study, and most of the staff had retired to their quarters. Elise used the opportunity to tidy the hallway bookshelf and dust the baseboards one last time before turning in. Vivian came down the stairs without warning. She wasn't wearing heels or makeup. Her robe was loose and her hair was unpinned. She didn't speak at first. She stood at the bottom of the staircase and stared out the tall front windows. Elise stepped aside. "Did you grow up with help in your house?" Vivian asked suddenly. "No, ma'am." "Figures." Elise said nothing. Vivian walked slowly toward the hallway and looked around. "This house used to be filled with flowers. I had a decorator who changed them every week. But the scent started giving me headaches." "Yes, ma'am. I removed every vase, every pot, every plant." The silence felt cleaner. Elise remained still. Vivian turned to her. "You want to know something, Elise? I wasn't always like this." "I don't judge, ma'am." "You should," Vivian said sharply. "Everyone else does. They call me names behind my back. Cold, controlling, difficult. I just work here." Vivian's tone dropped. "People say I married Mr. Cole for his money. That I forced him to change his will. That I pushed his adult children out." "I wouldn't know, ma'am." "No, you wouldn't," Vivian said, her voice flat. "But you keep looking at me like I'm still human." "I wasn't looking at you at all, ma'am." Vivian studied her for a moment, then walked past and into the sitting room. Elise returned to the linen closet. Later that night, Elise heard quiet footsteps outside her room. She opened the door slightly and saw Vivian standing by the hallway mirror, her reflection still, her expression unreadable. After a few seconds, Vivian turned and walked away. The next morning, the staff were surprised to find no shouting in the kitchen. Vivian entered, picked up her lemon water, and left without a word. The steward raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Opal just shook her head. Elise didn't comment. That afternoon, while cleaning the top-floor balcony, Elise overheard a conversation between Mr. Adrian and a visitor on the phone. The door to his study was ajar. "I know she's harsh," he said. "But it wasn't always this way." The pause. "After the miscarriage, she changed. She pushed everyone out. She acts like power keeps her safe." Another pause. "I've tried, but she doesn't let anyone close." Elise stepped away from the door and moved down the hallway. That evening, Mrs. Opal found Elise organizing kitchen shelves. "Did you hear she asked about you this morning?" "Who?" "Madam. She wanted to know where you were." "I was in the garden." Opal lowered her voice. "I don't know what you're doing, but something's shifting." "I'm not doing anything." "She hasn't thrown anything in 3 days." "That's something." "I just keep to myself." Opal paused. "She's been through a lot, you know." "I figured." "She was married before. Lost a baby. The husband left. She started over with Mr. Cole." Elise wiped her hands and said nothing. At 9 o'clock, Elise went outside to empty the trash. Light rain was falling again. She moved quickly, dropped the bag into the bin, and turned to return. As she passed the garden arch, she saw Vivian sitting on the stone bench under the mango tree, robe damp, eyes distant. Elise didn't stop. But then Vivian spoke. Do you ever get tired of being silent? I speak when I need to, Elise replied. Vivian didn't look at her. And when do you need to? When someone's listening. Vivian blinked slowly but didn't answer. Elise walked back inside. In the laundry room, she hung up the mop and folded the remaining towels. Her hands were red from cleaning fluid, and a blister had opened near her thumb. She rinsed it, wrapped it in gauze, and prepared the mop for the next morning. Before turning in, she checked on her phone. One missed call from the neighbor watching Jalen. No messages. She placed the phone face down and lay on her mattress. In the dark, she thought about what she'd overheard, what she'd seen, and what she hadn't said. But she wasn't here to fix anyone. She was here for her son. Tuesday morning began like every other. Elise was up before dawn, sweeping the back steps, wiping down the railing, and checking the cleaning supply shelf for what needed refilling. She moved through her routine without pause. The mansion was still asleep except for the sound of the front gate sliding open for the delivery truck. In the kitchen, Mrs. Opal handed her a small breakfast plate. Eat while it's still hot. You didn't eat anything yesterday. Thank you, Elise said, taking a quick bite between folding clean napkins. By 7:30, Vivian Cole entered the room. She wore a cream pantsuit and carried a stack of folders under one arm. She paused when she saw Elise drying the marble counter. You, she said, not harshly but direct. Come with me. Elise set down the cloth and followed her through the main hall, past the dining room, and into the study. It was the first time she had been invited inside. Sit, Vivian said, pointing to the chair opposite her desk. Elise sat straight, hands in her lap. Vivian dropped the folders onto the table and leaned back in her chair. I have a foundation, she began. It supports girls' education, some charity projects, mostly press-friendly stuff. I don't run it personally anymore, but I still have influence. Elise didn't respond. There's a new initiative, Vivian continued. An outreach program for underfunded clinics and children's shelters. They need someone to help coordinate logistics. Nothing fancy. Sorting files, managing visits, scheduling drivers. A lot of it is hands-on, messy, and tiring. Elise kept her expression neutral. I see. I want you to help with it. I wasn't aware I had a choice. You do, Vivian replied. I'm asking, not ordering. This isn't part of your maid duties. Why me? Vivian tapped a pen against the desk once, then set it down. You show up. You work. You don't whine. And you don't play games. I need someone who isn't looking to impress donors but actually gets things done. Elise looked down briefly. When would it start? This week. You'd still live here, still keep some light duties. But you'd spend most mornings at the main office. I'll have a driver take you. I'll handle the paperwork. I need to ask about my schedule, Elise said, and make sure it won't affect my salary. Vivian raised an eyebrow. You're turning down a better position because you're worried about losing maid pay? I'm worried about my son. He has medical bills. I need consistency. Vivian paused. Your salary would increase. Slightly. But more importantly, you'd meet people who actually know how to get things done. Doctors. Coordinators. Not just rich wives with empty calendars. Elise nodded slowly. I'll try it. Vivian stood. Be ready tomorrow morning by 8. Wear something decent. Elise stood too. Thank you, ma'am. Vivian turned away, already flipping through her phone. Don't make me regret it. That afternoon, the other staff noticed Elise had been gone longer than usual. The housekeeper asked if she was feeling unwell. Mrs. Opal just smiled faintly and kept peeling yams. At 5 o'clock, Elise was back in the garden sweeping fallen leaves when Mr. Cole walked past with his newspaper under his arm. You look busier than usual, he said. I'm still catching up, sir. I heard my wife gave you a new assignment. She did. She doesn't do that often. I was surprised too. She must trust you. Elise looked up. I didn't think she trusted anyone. She doesn't, he replied. Not easily. Elise nodded and continued sweeping. That evening, in her room, Elise opened her notebook and scribbled down the new schedule. She flipped to the hospital notes and stared at the unpaid invoice. It hadn't changed. But something about the day felt different. The next morning, Elise wore a clean blouse and skirt. The fabric was plain, but it was neat and pressed. She stood by the front entrance at 7:50 sharp. The black car pulled up, and the driver, a man in his early 40s, stepped out. "Miss Elise?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Kojo. Madam said to bring you to the downtown office." She nodded and got into the back seat. The drive was quiet. Elise kept her hands in her lap and looked out the window. The city was waking up. Children in uniforms, vendors opening stalls, traffic building near the flyovers. At 8:25, they arrived at a small office building tucked between a clinic and a warehouse. Kojo led her inside. A woman at the front desk greeted her and handed her a clipboard. "Madam Cole said you'd be helping us today," the woman said. "We're grateful. We need help sorting through donation lists and preparing the next round of supply deliveries." Elise nodded and got to work immediately. By noon, she had finished sorting 2 boxes of paperwork, labeled all the files, and helped carry inventory from the back room. The work was tiring but familiar. It reminded her of the hospital back room where she once volunteered to get free medicine samples for Jalen. At 1:30, Kojo returned to pick her up. On the drive home, he glanced in the rearview mirror. "She doesn't usually do this," he said. "I know. Giving people chances, not for a while. I'm not asking why. Maybe that's why she picked you." When Elise returned to the mansion, she changed out of her clothes and returned to the kitchen to help prepare dinner. Vivian didn't say anything when she passed through, but she noticed. That night, Elise sat on her mattress and looked at her hands. They were rough, scratched, and red from lifting boxes. But her chest felt lighter than usual. Vivian hadn't been kind. But she had opened a door. And Elise intended to walk through it. Elise arrived at the foundation office the next morning at 8:05. Kojo had already dropped her off and driven off without saying much. The woman at the front desk greeted her with a clipboard and a pile of envelopes. "These are appointment letters and supply confirmations for our clinic partners," she said. "Sort them by region, then attach them to their corresponding contact lists." Elise nodded and got to work. By 10 o'clock, she had already sorted the documents and helped restock a storage shelf in the back room. No one had to tell her twice. She moved efficiently, didn't speak unless necessary, and stayed focused on every task. By the 3rd day, the staff were asking for her by name. "She's fast," one coordinator said, "and she doesn't complain." "She's better than half the interns we've had," another added. When Vivian visited the office unannounced on Thursday morning, she walked through the front door without looking at anyone. But when she passed Elise carrying 2 boxes to the back room, she paused. "You're still here." "I was assigned here," Elise said. "You look tired." "I'm used to it." Vivian didn't reply. She kept walking. That afternoon, Elise was filing medical request forms when one caught her attention. The logo at the top matched the hospital where Jalen had been treated. She paused, looked at the name, and saw a familiar physician listed as the clinic lead. She flagged the document and asked the front desk supervisor about it. "Dr. Otieno is part of the Children's Heart Support Initiative," the woman explained. "They offer surgical sponsorships on a case-by-case basis." "Why?" "No reason," Elise said, placing the file back in the tray. Back at the mansion that evening, Elise returned to her usual chores. She helped Mrs. Opal clean the stove, wiped down the dining room chairs, and swept the guest hallway. At 7:15, Vivian entered the kitchen, holding a folded sheet of paper. "Did you see this?" she asked, handing Elise a copy of the day's report from the office. "No, ma'am." "You organized the inventory receipts?" "Yes." "You flagged the expired batch of antibiotics?" "They were mislabeled. The dates didn't match the box records." Vivian studied her. "Good catch." "Thank you, ma'am." Vivian didn't leave right away. She looked at the pot Mrs. Opal was stirring. "What are you cooking?" "Egusi soup, ma'am," Opal said cautiously. "Is there enough for one more bowl?" "Yes, ma'am." Vivian nodded. "I'll eat in the small lounge. Bring it in 20 minutes. Opal waited until she left the room, then looked at Elise. "Did that just happen?" "She asked for soup," Elise replied. She hasn't touched food from this kitchen in weeks. Maybe she's just hungry. Opal chuckled under her breath and went back to stirring. That night, after dinner, Elise found a new mop and broom set resting against the laundry room wall. They were clean, unused, and wrapped in plastic. There was no note, but she knew who had placed them there. The next morning, Elise stepped into the nursery off the main corridor. It was a room that hadn't been used in years. Dust coated the bookshelves, and stuffed animals sat untouched in a corner. Vivian had once told the housekeeper to keep the room locked. No one had been in since Elise arrived. But today, the door was open. Vivian stood near the window, arms crossed. Elise paused at the doorway. I was looking for the extra linen box, Elise said. Vivian didn't turn around. This used to be for a child we never had. Elise didn't respond. Vivian glanced at her. You're still standing there. I wasn't sure if I should go. You're already inside. Elise nodded and stepped further in. Vivian pointed to a small bookshelf. That one's warped at the base. It leans. I can fix it. Then do it. Elise crouched, checked the back support, and saw that one of the screws had loosened. She fetched a screwdriver and tightened it without speaking. When she finished, she stood and waited. Vivian spoke without looking at her. Did you find out about that doctor at the office? Elise hesitated. I recognized the name. My son was seen at that hospital once. Will you speak to him again? I haven't decided. Why not? I don't like asking for help unless I know someone is listening. Vivian turned to face her fully for the first time that day. He's not listening. But I am. Elise nodded slightly. Thank you. That evening, Elise helped organize one of the guest closets. She found a new bedsheet set tucked into the bottom shelf with a small tag attached. Her name was written in neat cursive. She didn't say anything. She folded it carefully and returned it to the spot where she found it. As she exited the hallway, she nearly ran into Mr. Cole. Good evening, he said. Good evening, sir. I heard you're working with the foundation now. Yes, sir. My wife doesn't offer that opportunity lightly. I didn't ask for it. Exactly, he said. Elise bowed her head and returned to her room. Later that night, as she prepared to sleep, she looked at the wall where she had taped Jalen's prescription list. She had memorized every number, every dose. But now, for the first time, she had something else to write beside it. She picked up a pen and wrote in the corner of the page, maybe. By the start of the third week, everyone in the house had noticed the shift. Vivian was still strict, still demanding, but something had changed. She no longer shouted across rooms. She didn't throw objects. She hadn't slapped anyone in over 10 days. And she asked for Elise by name. It didn't go unnoticed. That Thursday morning, Elise was helping pack a new delivery of supplies at the foundation office when the front desk assistant handed her an envelope. From Dr. Odieno's clinic, the woman said. They've confirmed your son's name. He's been placed on the list for review. Elise opened the envelope. Inside was a form requesting additional medical records and consent for sponsorship evaluation. She held it quietly for a moment, then folded it and placed it in her bag. Kojo picked her up at 1:30. On the drive back, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Everything okay? Yes, Elise said. Just paperwork. When she returned to the mansion, the atmosphere was tense. She noticed the housekeeper avoiding eye contact and Mrs. Opal keeping her voice low. In the hallway, the steward approached her quietly. Someone's been spreading rumors. What kind? That you're trying to replace Madame Cole. Elise frowned. That's ridiculous. Apparently not to everyone. An hour later, as Elise was helping set the table for dinner, a woman she didn't recognize walked into the kitchen. She wore an older maid's uniform and carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew the place. Excuse me, the woman said loudly. Is this where the new favorite hides? Elise didn't respond. Mrs. Opal looked up, startled. The woman turned to her. You know Madame Cole brought her back? I don't get involved, Opal replied. The woman faced Elise again. You think because she lets you carry a few folders, you're something special? I'm just doing my job, Elise said. The woman scoffed. She tried this before. She picks one maid, treats her better than the rest, then turns on her the moment she gets bored. Elise picked up a tray of cutlery and walked away. That evening, after dinner, Vivian called Elise into the lounge. "I heard someone from the staff confronted you." "She didn't threaten me," Elise said. "Just talked. I dismissed her for a reason. She came back today without my approval. I didn't react." "I know," Vivian said. "But others did." Elise waited. Vivian continued. "The housekeeper asked if I was grooming you to replace her. I have no interest in anyone's position. People don't like what they don't understand. That's not my concern." Vivian leaned back in the chair. "I wasn't prepared for how the house would shift because of you." "I didn't shift anything." Vivian looked at her closely. "You walked in, and everything started changing." "Because I cleaned?" "No. Because you didn't break." Elise said nothing. Vivian stood up and walked to the window. "You remind people of what they're not. That's what makes them uncomfortable. I'm not trying to remind anyone of anything. I just have a son who needs surgery." Vivian turned. "And you think that's all this is?" Elise nodded. "Yes." Vivian walked past her. "Then stay focused." The next day, Elise found that the mop cupboard had been rearranged. Her supplies were missing, and several of her cleaning tools had been swapped out for broken ones. She quietly searched the back hallway and located everything stacked in a corner behind unused boxes. She returned the items to their place and continued working. Later that afternoon, she heard two staff arguing in the pantry. The former maid, the one who had confronted her, had apparently told the driver that Elise had plans to gain favor with Mr. Cole, that she was manipulating her way into the family. Elise ignored it. But at dinner, she noticed Vivian watching her carefully. After the meal, Vivian approached her in the hallway. "I can fire all of them," she said. "You don't need to. They're undermining you. They're scared. That's not new. You're not bothered?" "I'm used to people not liking me." Vivian narrowed her eyes. "But this is different." "It's not. I've seen worse in hospital corridors, waiting rooms, and from people who smile while turning you away." "You're saying this is easy?" "No. But it's not unfamiliar." Vivian crossed her arms. "Why are you still here?" "Because leaving won't help my son." Vivian took a deep breath, held it for a moment, then exhaled. "I had people say the same things about me. That I was replacing someone. That I didn't belong. I'm not trying to belong. I'm just trying to get through the month." Vivian looked at her, eyes unreadable, then nodded. "Keep going." "I plan to." That night, Elise called her neighbor and spoke with Jalen over the phone. His voice was thin but cheerful. He said he missed her and asked if the hospital people were coming soon. "Soon," she said quietly. "Very soon." When she hung up, she looked over at the signed form from the clinic, now resting neatly on her bedside shelf. The path wasn't clear yet, but it was beginning to open. The next morning began quietly. Elise went through her usual routine without interruption. She swept the driveway, polished the stair railings, and restocked the kitchen paper towels. Vivian passed her twice in the hallway and didn't speak. But she looked. And Elise noticed. At 10:15, a sharp cry echoed from upstairs. Elise paused mid-mopping. It wasn't a scream of pain or anger. It was something else, short, sharp, distressed. She put the mop aside and moved quickly toward the hallway. As she climbed the staircase, she saw the nursery door ajar. Inside, Vivian stood frozen, one hand gripping the edge of the changing table. A broken frame lay on the floor beside her, glass scattered across the carpet. Elise didn't speak. She bent down and carefully picked up the frame. It was a photo. A faded ultrasound printout tucked beside a sonogram date card. The glass had cracked, but the image was intact. Vivian didn't look at her. "I forgot it was even in there," she said, voice quiet. "I was trying to clear space for storage." Elise set the pieces gently on the desk. Vivian wiped her face. "Do you ever think you've moved on from something only to realize it's still there, right under the surface?" "I think about that every day." Vivian nodded. "She wasn't born. But I gave her a name." "You don't have to tell me." "I never told anyone," Vivian said. Not even Adrian. Elise stayed where she was. Vivian glanced at her. When I heard your son's voice over the phone yesterday, I was standing outside the hallway. He sounded small. He is. Vivian exhaled slowly. And you still come back here every day. I have to. Vivian sat down on the edge of the crib, now empty and unused. She picked at a loose thread on the side of her blouse. I've spent years building walls. But lately I can't stop noticing that they don't keep anything out. They just keep everything in. I understand. No, Vivian said, shaking her head. You endure. But you don't hide. That's different. Elise didn't argue. Vivian looked up again. I haven't said thank you. Not once. I'm not waiting for it. Well, you should hear it. All right. Thank you. Elise nodded once. You're welcome. Later that day, Elise was reviewing a clinic inventory list at the foundation office when the director approached her. You flagged this supply as backordered, the director said. The warehouse log was outdated, Elise explained. I called the vendor. They confirmed the delay. The director gave her a surprised look. Good catch. Vivian entered the office 10 minutes later. She wore a dark blazer and had a small tablet in hand. Elise, she called. Come with me. They stepped into the side conference room. Vivian closed the door behind them. I called the clinic, she said. They're moving your son's case up the review list. The doctor remembered you. He treated Jalen once before. I asked him to prioritize your file. I also submitted a personal note. Elise took a moment before replying. Thank you. You don't owe me anything, Vivian said. But I'm not doing this out of charity. I'm doing it because it's right. That still matters. Vivian sat down and tapped her fingers against the table. Do you want to be part of this foundation longer term? I haven't thought about that. Think about it now. I don't want to leave the house. My son needs me close, and I need housing I can afford. Then we'll make it work, Vivian said. I'm moving you to better quarters. Still on the property. Private space. Bathroom. Fan that works. You don't need to do that. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I trust you. Elise nodded. Then I'll accept. That evening, Elise returned to the mansion with the new housing keys in her pocket. Mrs. Opal noticed her packing her things. You're leaving? The cook asked. Just changing rooms. Who told you to? Madam. Opal looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. About time. The new room was still small, but clean and quiet. The mattress was new, the sheets folded, and a small desk had been placed near the window. A folded note sat on top. Elise opened it. It read, for Jalen, from someone who finally understands. No signature. Elise sat on the edge of the bed, placed the note beside her phone, and closed her eyes for a moment. Her chest didn't feel as tight. For once, the silence in the room wasn't heavy. At 8 p.m., Vivian entered the kitchen and asked Mrs. Opal what she was cooking. The staff froze. It was the first time in weeks she had asked a question without criticism. Vegetable rice and grilled fish, Opal replied cautiously. Vivian nodded. Smells good. Then she turned and left. No one spoke for a while. Later, as Elise prepared to close for the night, she passed Mr. Cole in the hallway. I heard about the room change, he said. Yes, sir. I also heard about the clinic update. We're waiting for confirmation. You've done something I didn't expect. I stayed. No. You softened her. And you didn't even try. The next morning, Elise arrived at the foundation office early. A new folder had been slid under the door. No label. She picked it up and opened it. Inside were printouts, emails, memos, and a photo. It was a picture of a check made out to a shell company, signed by one of the board members. The same board member who had recently pushed back on budget increases for pediatric care. Elise didn't sit down. She walked straight to the copy machine and made duplicates. By 9 a.m., she was standing outside Vivian's office. Vivian looked up. Something wrong? Elise held out the folder. This was under the door. Vivian opened it and scanned the first few pages. Her jaw tightened. Where did this come from? I don't know. Who else has seen it? Just me. Vivian shut the folder. Come with me. They walked down the hallway to a back conference room. Vivian closed the door and locked it. This is fraud, she said. He's been diverting funds to a company that doesn't exist. And we've been bleeding support staff for 6 months because of it. Can you prove it? These pages help. But we'll need more. I want you to go through the clinic procurement files. Look for anything with the initials TNR Logistics. That's the shell company. Elise nodded. How far back? 6 months minimum. Maybe a year. She got to work immediately. The storage room was hot, the files were dense, and the boxes were unlabeled. But Elise kept going. By noon, she had 4 files set aside. Each one had invoices from TNR Logistics for consulting services or equipment review, signed by the same board member. At 3 p.m., a dark car pulled into the lot. A man in a blue-gray suit stepped out. Elise recognized him immediately, Ronald Briggs, the board member in question. He didn't greet anyone. He marched straight into the main building. 5 minutes later, Vivian came out of her office, expression unreadable. Elise, she said, you're done for the day. I need the room. I can stay. I said that for him, not for you. Close the door behind you when you go. Elise left the folder on the desk and stepped out. From the hallway, she heard raised voices. Briggs was angry. You're accusing me based on trash dropped under a door? You know how easily that can be faked. Vivian's voice was low but firm. Then explain the identical invoices. The signatures. The funds routed through a company you incorporated 6 months ago using your brother's address. You went through my background? No. I went through your invoices. This will destroy your reputation. Vivian didn't respond. Briggs continued. You think they'll take your word over mine? You think a foundation board will believe you were duped by your own people? I don't need them to believe me, Vivian said. I need them to see this. There was a pause. And they will. At the press conference tomorrow. You're bluffing. Try me. There was silence. Then footsteps. Briggs stormed out, brushing past Elise without a glance. His face was red, and his phone was already in his hand. That night, Elise returned to the mansion quietly. Her room lights flickered when she turned them on. She reached for the bulb and stopped. A note had been taped inside the light fixture. It read, "Keep quiet, or your son loses his spot." No name. No signature. Just printed words on cheap paper. She folded the note and walked straight to Vivian's wing. A maid tried to stop her. She's not seeing anyone. She'll see me. Vivian was reading when Elise entered. Elise held out the note. Vivian read it. Her expression changed. Do you believe this is connected to Briggs? I don't know. But someone knows about my son's case. I had his case flagged through the clinic director personally. There are only 3 people who could know, me, the director, and someone on the approval committee. Then check them. I will. Vivian looked up. You still want to be part of this? Yes. Then you need to know something. If this goes public, they'll come after everyone who helped me build the evidence. That includes you. I'm not afraid. Good, Vivian said, because we're not backing down. The press conference was held at the Whitmore Foundation headquarters the next morning. Rows of chairs filled the courtyard. Reporters, cameras, and livestream crews were already setting up by 8:30 a.m. Vivian stood inside the glass lobby, her hands folded, watching through the window. Elise was beside her, holding a folder with everything they had gathered. You don't have to go out there, Vivian said quietly. I do, Elise replied. They need to know who did the work. Vivian nodded once. At 9 a.m. sharp, the podium microphones came on. Vivian stepped forward, flanked by Elise on her right and the clinic director on her left. Good morning, Vivian began. Thank you for being here. I won't waste your time. We have something to show you. She turned slightly, signaling to the AV tech. On the giant screen behind her, scanned documents appeared, invoice after invoice, each labeled TNR Logistics, each signed by Ronald Briggs. each showing large sums funneled out of the pediatric division budget. There has been internal theft, Vivian continued. Funds meant for cancer treatment, family housing, and prenatal care were redirected to a fake company. We have traced those transfers, confirmed signatures, and matched corporate records. Gasps and camera flashes followed. Vivian stepped back. Elise stepped forward. This began with a folder slid under a door, Elise said. But we didn't stop there. We dug through storage rooms, receipts, and internal logs. I saw line items labeled as consulting, but they had no service dates, no contact names, no documentation at all. A reporter raised her hand. What's your role in the foundation? I'm a maid, Elise said plainly. Hired to clean floors. Silence. But I read invoices. I read statements. And I saw something that didn't add up. So I asked questions. Another reporter stood. Are you saying this investigation was started by a housekeeper? Vivian answered. Yes. And it was finished by her too. Cameras turned sharply to Elise. Someone asked, Are you formally trained in finance? No, Elise said. But I'm trained in paying attention. That earned a ripple of surprised chuckles. Vivian stepped forward again. Effective immediately, Ronald Briggs has been removed from the board. Our legal team is filing charges for fraud and embezzlement. And we are redirecting every misused dollar back to where it belongs, into care. A hand shot up. Will the foundation change its oversight procedures after this? Yes, Vivian said, starting with an internal review led by someone outside our traditional hierarchy. She turned to Elise. Elise Quinn has agreed to chair our new Ethics and Integrity Advisory Panel. She will work directly with our CFO and report only to me. The courtyard fell into a stunned silence. Elise said nothing. She didn't smile. She didn't react. The press conference ended 20 minutes later. Inside, as the reporters packed up and guests filtered out, Julian approached Elise. He looked at her differently now. Not like a maid. Not like a stranger. I was wrong, he said simply. About you. Elise nodded. You weren't the only one. He paused. Vivian told me about the threats. If anyone ever contacts your son again, I want to know. She handled it. I want to help. Elise looked him in the eye. Then treat people better. Not just me. Julian didn't flinch. I will. She turned to leave, but he stopped her with one last question. Why didn't you walk away? Why stay through everything? Elise looked over her shoulder. Because when you clean someone's house, you see everything they try to hide. And sometimes, they need someone to tell them the floor's rotting under their feet. Rain pattered lightly on the mansion's skylights. It had been 3 weeks since the press conference. The boardroom had been repainted. Vivian insisted on it. She called it symbolic, scrubbing out the old, bringing in something clean. Downstairs, in the nursery, Sophie was curled up asleep in Elise's lap, breathing softly. She didn't wake once, Elise said, stroking the child's back. I noticed, Vivian replied, leaning against the doorframe. She's calmer now. More stable. I just stayed consistent. Same routine, same warmth. Vivian nodded. That's exactly what this house needed. From the hallway, footsteps approached. Julian entered, holding a thin folder. She's out, he said, nodding to Sophie. She's safe, Elise corrected. He gave a half smile. Can I show you something? She stood, gently easing Sophie onto the small couch. The girl didn't stir. Julian handed Elise the folder. Inside were architectural sketches. A community wellness center, he said, built near the outer boroughs. For families. Parents. Kids like mine who had everything. And kids like yours, who had to build everything. Elise studied the plans. You already got zoning? Vivian moved fast. She wants it started before the next fiscal quarter. He hesitated. I want you to run it. Elise raised an eyebrow. You already made me the head of your ethics panel. This is different, Julian said. This isn't about oversight. It's about heart. Structure. You have all of that. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something else. A letter. From the mayor's office. He handed it to her. They want to recognize you at the city ceremony. Honoring women of integrity. I'm not interested in awards, Elise said, handing it back. I figured. But Sophie wants you there. That made her pause. She asked if you'd sit next to her. Vivian stepped in quietly. You don't have to say anything. Just show up. Elise looked at both of them. All right. I'll go. Julian nodded. Thank you. He turned to leave but stopped in the doorway. One more thing, he said. I'm rehiring staff. Rebuilding this place. Don't call it rebuilding, Elise said. You didn't lose a house. You almost lost a daughter. Julian took the words like a punch, but he didn't retreat. She still calls for you at night, he said. Elise looked at the couch. Sophie stirred slightly, then settled again. I'll stay, Elise said. For now. Until she's steady. Julian looked relieved. But he didn't say anything else. He left. Later that night, Elise sat on the back steps of the mansion. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like new soil and pine. Sophie toddled out, blanket trailing behind her. You're not supposed to be up, Elise said. Sophie climbed into her lap. I had a dream, Sophie whispered. Was it scary? No. It was quiet. You were in it. Elise pulled the blanket tighter around them both. Inside, lights glowed from the kitchen. Vivian was setting out tea. Julian stood at the window watching the two of them. He didn't say a word. He just watched. And this time he saw clearly. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from and what part hit you the hardest. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and the quiet power of doing what's right, even when no one's watching. We post new dramas every week. Don't miss the next one.